Just noticed the UN flag.
The what?
The UN flag.
Flags, yeah. I guess because they control education.
What are they calling this? The Occupy?
Activist Assembly.
Activist Assembly. Okay. Occupy Activists Assembly. It's Friday, January the 20th, and all the usual suspects are here. Should be an interesting evening. They've got some of the controlled union people and supposed activist leaders like Judy Rebick making a speech tonight. So we'll head to the auditorium and see how the show goes.
There you are. And how many guests do you have?
I have one so far, but I should have four.
I went to the rally.
Well, yes, oddly enough, I was on the list.
I'm having some trouble registering here, even though I sent out the emails.
So anyway, if we're not going to talk about this, if we don't want to cause trouble, then
Let's roll right there. Okay, thanks. Hi there.
Hello. So what do you have, like email address?
First name.
The importance of outreach, protest, mass mobilization, and of constant recruitment of new activists. Our first speaker will be Judy Rebick, is a veteran activist on feminist, democracy, anti-racist, and international solidarity issues. She's also a writer, teacher, and sometimes journalist. She has a new ebook coming out in March called Occupy This. She is the founding publisher of Rabble.com and is a regular on Q Media Panel. Our second panelist is Syed Hussan, is an organizer, activist, writer based in Toronto. Hussan has been involved with anti-colonial, migrant justice, feminist, anti-racist, environmental justice, anti-war, and prison abolition movement, and is active with No One Is Illegal Toronto and Toronto Stop the Cuts network. As part of his movement in the Toronto Community Mobilization Network, Hussan was charged with conspiracy. Those charges were dropped after 18 months. 6 activists and community organizers have been jailed for the anti-G20 protests. Our third speaker, Carolyn Egan, is the president of the Steelworkers Toronto Area Council, United Steelworkers Local 8300. She is a longtime pro-choice, anti-war, social justice activist in Toronto and a leading member of the International Socialists. Please welcome our guest speakers.
Carolyn and I were just talking because 30 years ago in this room, she and I were on this very stage with Dr. Henry Morgentaler. And we had a rally, their place was packed right to the back. And outside we had a big demonstration of anti-choice people that we successfully stopped from having. The pro-choice movement was out in the streets, the women's movement was out in the streets. International Women's Day was huge. It was the 80s, wasn't it, when we marched through the Eaton Center in solidarity with the Eaton strike. It was the environmental movement was just getting going, and on Earth Day it was really out in the streets, demonstrations of the environmental movement. The labor movement was really active. Every movement was out in the streets, and we were winning victories. Because this week we won 3 victories that I know about. Maybe there's more. I want to make the point that we've won these victories in part, I think in large part, because of Occupy. Now, Occupy didn't lead these struggles. But why am I saying that? I'm saying that for 2 reasons. First of all, Occupy has scared the shit out of the powers that be. And then what Occupy did is by its brilliance, by its tactics, by its mobilization, by its ability to reach out to so many people and touch them, it forced the media, it forced ordinary people, it didn't force ordinary people, it let ordinary people believe in their own perceptions about what was really happening in the world, which was the opposite of what they were being told was happening. And Occupy did that. It shifted the sands. It shifted the sands, and it opened up. It opened up the discussion, if you want to put it that way. But it did something else, too, which is it gave ordinary people the idea that we could change the world. That's the most important thing so far that Occupy has done. And there's a feeling in all these camps. And the feeling is a feeling, and I'm not even comfortable saying it, I was telling my friend Mike, of love, of connection. It's a feeling of love. In Occupy New York, in Occupy Wall Street, Occupy New York has, well, last count, had 70 working groups. So I think that I'm learning what Occupy is about. I think it's a work in progress. In Spain, they say, we're moving slow because we're going far. And I think we have to be patient. And we have to savor our victories. I was talking to Hussan about what a great victory it was the other night to stop Ford in his tracks. And yeah, sure, it didn't defeat his whole agenda. But he thought he could do whatever he wanted. He thought he had those middle-of-the-road counselors bamboozled. And one thing we learned in the pro-choice movement is that victories are really important to build a movement. And that victory is going to build the movement that's going to get rid of Ford and the Ford brothers once and for all and send them back to wherever, I don't know where they come from, but wherever it is, I hope they'll go back soon. Thank you very much. Let's talk about something else. Yeah, okay, sorry, I have 5 more minutes, so. Okay, so because I don't keep taking notes and I'm getting older, I do forget things. So the first thing I want to say is, I really want to encourage everybody to go Monday night to Occupy Talks on Indigenous issues.
From Occupy into the financial district and onto City Hall. And so, just like for most of you, Occupy holds a very special place in my heart, for it was a burst of freedom in a very long time. And I think that's a really good way to describe what Occupy is. It's a burst of freedom. A sudden realization for some of us that a lot, maybe anything, is possible. And our freedom has consistently been stolen by corporations, by governments, by the so-called intellectual elite, by so-called movement managers. And I think Occupy encampments are in direct resistance to that. What Hakeem Bey calls a semi-permanent autonomous zone. A small space of autonomy, of freedom, that bursts, erupts on the scene, and even if suppressed, will re-emerge elsewhere. I think Occupy movements are effective because they're grounded in the struggles of the past, be it the Indignados movement, the Arab Spring, that we've heard about recently. But I want to talk about some occupations in Toronto. And again and again and again, we have a history of occupations in this city, and that's why Occupy is effective. It's also effective because Occupy is a coming of a particular kind of age. When back, there was a time in the left when there was always a question of, is it race or is it class? Is it the issue of women or is it the issue of class? The Occupy movement is a movement where questions of difference are firmly entrenched. You know, this is why Indigenous writers, warriors, activists have responded to the idea of Occupy in South City. With obvious response that here, on one of the last remaining occupied settler colonies, the colonizers still rule. Each of these cities are already occupied. And these conversations could not simply be pushed aside as they could possibly have been at other moments. Multiple cities like LA, Oakland, New York, Boston, Denver, to name just a few, have actually stepped forward to decolonize their perspectives, to change their ideology and their terminology. Illegal, doing trainings about all of these things, marshalling, illegal, right? Yet everyone who came to Occupy implicitly or explicitly accepted that for us to really challenge the 1%, we would have to break their laws, right? And I think that when we do that, we decided that our beliefs, our values were more important than the law. And when laws are unjust, they must be resisted. We decided to break the law because so much of what we oppose is legal. So much of what we desire is illegal. We broke the law because these laws are made broken. Right? They were made to break us. To truly be free, to truly be that burst of freedom, we have to resist the law. Resist the laws that allow some to be rich and for the rest of us to live at their will. And I think that's true today. We must resist racism and sexism, homophobia and disableism. We must resist the very structure each of these laws is based on. We must resist colonialism. And I think a struggle cannot be to just gain permits and permissions. It must be to make it impossible for governments and corporations to enforce their laws. We need to challenge their very jurisdiction. That's what Occupy is. That's why it's effective. The police raided us. They kidnapped 4 of our comrades. And so in the hundreds, we went to 52 Division with many members of Occupy Toronto. And we asserted that we would leave no one behind. An effective movement is one that takes care of everyone on its side of the barricades. And I think on Tuesday, Occupy Toronto showed that. I also think that Occupy is an effective response to austerity.
I think as of right now it's 10/10 minus 1, but there should still be 9 there. I'd like now to introduce Judy Rebick.
That's all right, thank you very much. And they're telling us that we're all in it together, that their measures are necessary to keep governments from going bankrupt and to keep corporations competitive. That's certainly what they're telling us in the trade union movement. But it's not simply a question of cost trimming, cutting deficits, or bringing budgets into line. They want to use this opportunity to fundamentally change the nature of society and the role of the state. And there is no doubt that they're determined to fight this war down to the last drop of our blood, using financial loopholes, continuing to make profits, giving massive bonuses to upper management. Why not nationalize the banks and the corporations, bring those profits into the public realm, do away with the deficits? Why not? Well, the answer is that the attacks are not some kind of a pragmatic response to an economic crisis like Rob Ford or Harper or McGinty are telling us, but the implementation of an economic ideology intended to serve the wealthy, the 1% that you so clearly identified. I know in this city around Indigenous rights, the rallying at City Hall, the working with unions like the Canadian Union of Postal Workers, the Steel Workers, you marched with us to the banks and pointed the finger where it should be pointed. I know you've been helping one of our long-term strikes, 2 years, mostly Hispanic workers at Infinity Rubber.
You want to have a discussion about this?
Sure.
All right, let's get to some place where you can see our faces.
Yeah, Occupy Toronto, we're just here, Regroup and Occupy. We've got a bit of a review here. I guess, what do you guys think?
Well, I thought it was interesting. There's a lot of people there. There's maybe a couple hundred people there. You know, it's one of those things where it would be really nice if people who wanted some things done could bring more ideas to the table and move past some of the things we've heard before. It's almost like you're supposed to say certain things, and we know you're supposed to say certain things, so you say those things, and speakers say those things, and we're all supposed to hear those things, and you don't feel stupid if you didn't know something. You kind of know. So I just think that there needs to be a bit more new information. I mean, they're talking a lot about hurt feelings of different people, but less about poverty.
The right-wing government Republicans came in, and they tried to roll back union rights in a way that we hadn't seen in decades and decades.
It's a good thing that they can get this many people together. It's just that the purpose of it, I think, needs to be better defined, and what they're looking at. You want to talk about colonialism? Let's you know, we need to deal with colonialism. Let's research colonialism, study it, you know, study history a bit, and maybe some things will pop up that'll be of use today.
Well, the problem is that there's a lot of rhetoric going on there. For example, their last speaker, who was a leader in the steel union from the United States, first thing she did was get up and blame capitalism and start blaming the problems of the world on the right wing. Well, you and I both know that the right wing and the left wing are the same bird. You know, the real problem is globalism, not capitalism. Problem is that the whole movement has been taken over by a socialist ideology that wants to blame all the problems on capitalism. Capitalism is not the problem, globalism is. Out of the 3 speakers there tonight, not once did I hear any of them blame it on the banks. One of those speakers actually got up and started talking about
austerity is a massive
oh, the government's taking
it's
your
a
money.
theft from our public services to police. It's a theft from our public services to building armies, to building prisons, to building detention centers. It's a theft from our public services while we see anti-immigrant rhetoric rise, while we see an attack on unions, right? It's money being taken away from our public services and given as a bailout to corporations, to oil and mining gas companies.
No,
so
they're giving it to the fucking banks. Not one of those people got up and said, the reason the government is imposing austerity on you is part of the big banker scam of the way that our money is created. You know, this whole movement is really being orchestrated by the same people that all of these people think they're fighting against. The Occupy movement was actually created by these UN climate justice freaks whose only purpose is to move on from being local unions to international unions. The sub-agenda to Occupy is a one-world government and a one-world banking system, and they're not against it, they're for it.
We are at OISI, and we got in the lobby a UN flag.
UN flag in the lobby?
Yeah.
There's sort of two things that work. One, there's a lot of history and a lot of facts out there and a lot of explanations for what rich people actually do to get richer and why the poor get poorer and so on and so forth that are kind of missing from this. So it's not a question of malice on these people's parts, because I'm just thinking practically here. It would be great if local cities could occupy their own Occupy movements and say, no, hold on, we did a little work on this. You've already got an organizational framework. Let's introduce more ideas and get kind of an open marketplace of ideas and see what the most compelling things are. I mean, and it can work. I mean, look at Ron Paul in the U.S. with the End the Fed rallies and his association with ending the Federal Reserve private bank there and moving to a better system of money that's nationalized, it's publicly owned, and that's more accountable.
Well, in the end, that's what it all comes down to, is money. You know, and that's the one issue these people in Occupy are skirting, is the creation of money. And tonight's symposium only made it clear that the unions are exercising their control over the Occupy movement.
Well, yeah, it's the people, the establishment, the corporations, the banks, the super rich people who kind of hide how they're screwing us, but we all know they are. We can all say they are, but then no one can really explain how and how to stop it when it shouldn't be that hard, when it's kind of out there. They create a framework. So this is an example of that framework. What do? They'll take a bunch of people together who are kind of outside their own social circles, bring them to one that guarantees them a spot. It doesn't matter what you are, tall, short, able, disabled, gay, straight. There was a big muscular guy wearing a blue dress and a blonde wig. It's an inclusive group, but at the same time, that excludes the group from the rest of the culture. So that isolates the people that are involved in this type of thing. Yet, it also is an inclusive space. The people that are involved feel a certain attachment to it. And then the pièce de résistance
almost
is up
in
at
a
the front.
cultish way, by
right,
the way.
and the pièce de résistance is up at the front with the people speaking who make sure that it's a simple message that they already understand and already feel, and make it about feelings instead of economics and poverty. So racism, how did you feel? It's not there is real racism out there, there's real sexism, there's real all sorts of things. But the root causes of our problems are economic and political and deal with the power structure. The idea of focusing on the way people feel about things first keeps us from getting to those problems. So it's an issue.
There's a lot of control going on there.
I think it started because of the human mic. Because with the human mic, if you say, I love you, what happens? Yeah, it's so great, right? So I think it started like that, but then people started to do it more. And at first it seemed kind of cheesy to me, But then after a while, it was kind of nice. It wasn't that they all said it to me, they were saying it to each other. But mostly there's a feeling of connection. And it's a feeling of connection. I felt it before. It's not that I haven't. It's a feeling you get on a picket line and strike. It's a feeling you get at a really good action.
They're talking about a lot of feelings in there, the love within the group. But, you know, what they're not talking about is the censorship within that group. There's a lot of censorship going on in Occupy.
The whole game is divide and conquer. So even dividing the critics of Occupy from Occupy and conquering them both is something that I think is being accomplished here. And I think that we're all guilty of it, because anyone who criticizes anyone has to be careful how they do it, or you can't, you know, appeal to them. So I say with respect to Occupy, it's really, really simple. If most people there are cool, then they should, you know, look into things further, look into the critics of Occupy. But the critics of Occupy should also understand that in today's world, where we can kind of think what we want, feel what we want, you know, it doesn't matter, it's all about me, it's how you feel, well, I believe this, I want to believe this. If you have a choice to feel positive about the Occupy movements, because that's your bent, then you'll make that choice. And if I come along and say something negative about the Occupy movements, and that's the choice you make, to think negatively or positively about it, and you know what the general response is among the people you associate with, you're going to try and keep it. So I would say look at these things positively, but spin it to include more options for them and for everyone else. Because if you just go against it, you lose them, and they are a core group of people who, by and large, are sincere, I would think, with a few who probably aren't, and then, you know, that's worth exploring as well.
Great.
I agree.
You guys want to introduce yourselves? Or you want to go anonymous?
Lawrence McCurry, activist, writer, chair of Communications and Publicity Canada Action Party.
Sure. Vijay Sarma, activist, philosopher, journalist, artist, wear a few hats, and yeah, try and speak the truth once in a while whenever possible.
Word up. All right, thanks a lot, guys.